Welcome to the Squirrel Sessions, where your hosts, Ace Harper and Piper Reed, take you on a deep dive into the neurolinguistic and mental wellness insights of me, Stacy Braiuca, otherwise known as the Squirrel Wrangler. Together, they will analyze, explore, and uncover actionable wisdom from my groundbreaking podcasts, play-by-play style. Get ready to wrangle your thoughts and unlock clarity with all of us.
Okay, so have you ever felt that, that feeling, heart racing, thoughts just on a loop? That's what we're diving into today, anxiety. But not just take a deep breath stuff, right? Yeah. We're going deeper with some really cool sources, actually. Yeah. We've got this insightful Medium article and podcast episode by Stacy Braiuca.
Oh, the Squirrel Wrangler.
Yes, exactly. Squirrel Wrangler. Plus, there's other podcasts that goes into some hidden anxiety triggers,
Yeah. I think what I find really fascinating is so often we try to squash anxiety instead of really getting to know it, right?
Yeah.
It's trying to turn off a smoke alarm without actually checking for the fire.
Oh, that's such a good analogy. And that's kind of like Stacy's whole thing, right? Turning that alarm into something useful.
Right.
I mean, she even says in her article, anxiety is your body's way of signaling that something needs attention.
I like that. And, that attention shouldn't be, how do we just stop feeling this way? It's got to be about what's causing it. I thought it was interesting how she breaks down the symptoms into three categories,
Oh, yeah.
Physical, emotional, and cognitive. So it's not just that racing heart. It's the thoughts and the irritability. And
it's a full body experience, not just in our heads, right? So, okay, let's say that wave of anxiety hits. What's the first thing?
Well, both the article and her podcast really emphasize mindfulness.
Yeah.
But not in a vague, kind of way.
Right.
She gets really practical, I think.
Yes. She has these three techniques: breath awareness, body scans, and mindful walking. Have you tried any of these?
I'm a fan of the body scan, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's amazing how just bringing your attention to each part of your body, noticing what you feel, it can actually calm you down. There's research showing it can actually shift your brain activity away from that fight or flight mode.
So it's not just, some woo-woo stuff. There's actual science to it.
Yeah.
You're hitting pause on the anxiety so you can actually think.
Exactly, yeah. And in her podcast, Stacy talks about how mindfulness helps you build this buffer against anxiety.
Yeah.
Not about getting rid of it, but creating space to respond in a healthy way.
So it's that brings us to boundaries, right? Because in her article, Stacy makes this strong connection between setting boundaries and managing anxiety.
Which makes total sense if you think about it. If you're always overcommitted, saying yes to everything, letting people just drain you, your anxiety is going to be through the roof.
It's your inner squirrel is just on high alert all the time, juggling a million things at once. And she gives some really good advice on how to set those boundaries, 3 steps: identifying your priorities, communicating clearly, and then protecting your space.
Yeah. The one that resonated most with me, and I think this is something our listeners can think about too, is the idea of protecting your space. Yeah. Not just physical space, but mental, emotional space too.
So that could be anything from turning off notifications to saying no more to actually scheduling some downtime.
Exactly. It's creating those boundaries that allow you to recharge.
Yeah.
So you can show up as your best self.
And Stacy really emphasizes that when you set those healthy boundaries, it's not selfish, it's self-care.
Right. And self-care ties in perfectly with this other podcast you sent over.
Yeah.
The one that focuses on the silent forces that kind of drive anxiety.
Yes, right. This podcast identifies 4 of them: lack of sleep, lack of self-care, poor stress management, and then societal stigmas. It's crazy how these things we might not even think about can have such a huge impact on our anxiety levels.
And I think it's not just about addressing these forces individually, but seeing how they all connect,
Oh, like a domino effect. Let's break down each of these, starting with sleep or really the lack of it. I think we've all been there where you didn't sleep well and you're a little more on edge.
Yeah, but it goes beyond just feeling, grumpy. When you're sleep deprived, your brain's ability to regulate your emotions, cope with stress, it takes a hit. Yeah. It's like walking a tightrope without a safety net.
Oh, so that inner squirrel is even more jittery.
Exactly.
Okay, and then there's the lack of self-care, which I think can be such a slippery slope when you're already feeling anxious. You get caught in the "I'm too busy" trap.
And what's interesting is that self-care doesn't have to be this grand, time-consuming thing. It's really about those small intentional acts that nourish you.
So like 5 minutes of deep breathing, listening to your favorite song, even just a quick call with a friend.
Exactly. It's about finding those little pockets of joy and rejuvenation throughout the day.
Okay, so we've tackled sleep, we've tackled self-care. Next is poor stress management, which kind of sounds self-explanatory, but what does that actually look like in our everyday lives?
It's about the patterns and habits we develop or don't develop, I guess, for dealing with stress. Some people bottle everything up, some people lash out, some get stuck in procrastination mode. It's recognizing those unhealthy patterns and finding healthier ways to cope.
And that's where, I guess, the tools we've already talked about, the mindfulness, the boundaries can really come in handy.
Totally. Mindfulness can help you become more aware of how you react to stress. Boundaries can help you prevent some of that stress in the first place.
And then finally, we've got these sneaky societal stigmas, right, that can silently fuel anxiety. This is one that's often overlooked, but I think so important to talk about.
It's all the pressure, right? The pressure to achieve, to be perfect, to always be happy and productive. It's exhausting. And those unrealistic expectations can really weigh us down, make it harder to cope with the everyday stuff.
It's like we're constantly comparing ourselves to this imaginary ideal, which is just a recipe for anxiety. And I guess that's where self-compassion comes in.
Absolutely. We need to be kinder to ourselves, acknowledge our limitations, and embrace our imperfections. We're all a work in progress. That's okay.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here, but before we move on, I want to ask you, the listener, this. Of these four silent forces, the lack of sleep, the lack of self-care, the poor stress management, and the societal stigmas, which one resonates most with you, with your experience of anxiety? Think about that. We'll dive into more strategies for taming those squirrels right after this.
It's easy to get caught up in all that outside pressure and forget that we can choose how we respond to things.
Yeah, and that's where the idea of building resilience comes in, right? Like creating a shield against all those anxiety triggers.
Exactly. And both Stacy and that other podcast really highlight the importance of routine. And I know routine can sound kind of rigid.
Yeah.
But think of more like a framework, for creating stability.
Like building a solid foundation for your mental well-being. And Stacy suggests starting small, like just incorporating these manageable tasks into your day.
Yeah, it's not about like overhauling your whole life at once.
Right, baby steps.
Baby steps, yeah. And she emphasizes consistency, which I think is key.
Yeah.
Even on those days when you're just like not feeling it, sticking to your routine as much as possible, it can really help you maintain that sense of control, especially when everything else feels out of control.
Like creating a sense of normalcy, right, amidst all the chaos. And of course life is unpredictable. So flexibility is important too, right?
Absolutely. Stacy reminds us that it's okay to adjust our routine when we need to without feeling guilty.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance
between structure and being able to adapt.
Right.
It's interesting how all these strategies we've talked about, the mindfulness, the boundaries, routine, they're all kind of interconnected, like pieces of a puzzle.
Oh, I love that. And it's not just about managing anxiety. It's about creating a life that feels good, right?
Yeah.
Feels aligned.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of creating a life that feels good, Stacy also talks about finding peace in those like unexpected moments, which I think is something we often overlook,
It's easy to get caught up in the hustle.
Yeah.
And forget to appreciate those little moments of joy and peace.
Yeah. And she offers some really practical tips, like practicing gratitude, embracing nature, and creating these mindful transitions.
Oh, the mindful transitions.
Yeah.
I've found those really helpful. It's like creating a pause between activities, taking a few deep breaths, just being present.
Yeah, it's like hitting that reset button before you move on to the next thing. Instead of rushing through your day, you're bringing awareness to each moment. And
it doesn't have to be this big, formal meditation thing. It could be as simple as savoring your morning coffee, noticing the warmth of the sun on your skin, or appreciating the colors of the sunset.
Yeah, just those little moments of mindfulness that can really, really shift your perspective. Bring some calm into your day.
And it's not just about feeling good in the moment. It's about training your brain to be more present, less reactive,
Less reactive to those stressors.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot about managing anxiety, but I kind of want to shift gears a bit and talk about something that I think is often overlooked, and that's seeking support.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So often we try to handle everything ourselves, thinking we need to be strong and independent, but asking for help, that's a sign of strength.
Yeah. And there are so many different ways to get support, whether it's reaching out to a friend, a family member, joining a support group, or seeking professional guidance
Right.
from a therapist.
Yeah, and there's no shame in seeking professional help. Sometimes we just need a little extra support,
And finding the right therapist, it can be a game changer. It's like having a coach in your corner, helping you develop those coping skills.
And it's not just about talking through your problems. A good therapist can help you see those patterns, those beliefs that might be contributing to your anxiety.
Yeah, yeah. And then work with you to develop healthier ways of thinking, of responding to stress.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed, remember, you don't have to go through this alone. Reaching out, it can make a world of difference. Have you ever considered seeking professional help, listener? What was your experience? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And beyond professional help, think about your personal support network.
Yeah.
Who are those people you can lean on when things get tough?
Mm-hmm.
Who makes you feel heard and understood?
Yeah.
Nurturing those relationships, that's so important for our well-being.
Absolutely. It's those connections that give us strength and remind us that we're not alone in this journey. We've talked a lot about managing anxiety, but I think it's important to remember that anxiety itself isn't a bad thing.
Right.
It's a human emotion. It serves a purpose.
It's our body's way of alerting us to potential threats.
Right.
Keeping us safe. The key is finding that balance.
Between acknowledging those signals and not letting it take over.
Right. It's about learning to work with it, not against it.
Yeah. And as we learn to understand it, to manage it, we create space for other emotions too, right? Joy, peace, creativity, connection.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive on anxiety management, I want to leave you with this.
Yeah.
You are capable of incredible growth and transformation. Every step you take is a victory.
It's a journey, not a destination. And remember, you have the power to create a life where anxiety doesn't control you. A life filled with peace and purpose and joy. It's like we've been putting together this anxiety toolkit throughout this whole deep dive, and now you get to, pick and choose which tools work for you.
Yeah, and what's really neat is that Stacy actually gives us this 4-step roadmap for figuring that out in her article. She says, first, identify your triggers, then develop coping strategies that work for you, right?
Yeah, not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And then it's setting those realistic goals. Break them down into smaller steps, because I think tackling anxiety can feel really overwhelming if you're trying to do everything at once.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Right. Yeah.
And her last step is seeking support, which we talked about, but it's worth saying again, so important.
Yeah, it's like having that cheerleader in your corner reminding you that you're not alone. When I was first learning about anxiety, I was surprised by how many resources there actually are. Books, apps, online courses, even community groups. It's amazing.
It's like a whole secret society of people who get it right.
Yeah.
And that sense of community can be really powerful, knowing you're not the only one.
And speaking of community, we'd love to hear from you, listener. What resources have you found helpful in your anxiety journey? Share your tips, share your stories with us on social media. We love hearing from you. Yeah.
Because sometimes just hearing someone else's story can be so validating, so inspiring.
Right. It reminds us that we're all in this together. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. Remember that you are not your anxiety. You are so much more than those thoughts and feelings that try to take over.
You are resilient. You are capable.
Yeah.
And you have the power to create a life that feels good. It might not happen overnight, but with each step you take, you're getting closer. Keep going. You've got this.
And that's it for our deep dive into anxiety management. We hope these insights and strategies empower you to wrangle your own inner squirrel. Remember, peace and joy are possible, and the journey is worth it. Until next time, be kind to yourselves and keep those squirrels in check.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Squirrel Sessions. a deep dive dispatch. If you loved diving into these insights with Piper and Ace, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Want to learn more about the mind behind it all? Connect with me, Stacy Braiuca, the Squirrel Wrangler, on all social media as Stacy Braiuca, or visit stacybraiuca.com/connect. Until next time, keep wrangling those thoughts and unlocking clarity, one deep dive at a time.